Was Derrick Henry a fish play? A philosopher once pondered. Was Derrick Henry a fish play? Well, I don't know. I had pals who won tens of thousands of dollars playing Derrick Henry, so it couldn't have been that bad of a play. Old Peter would have said Derrick Henry was a fish play. Old Peter would have dug his heels in and said, you can't play a running back who's going to catch passes at 30 percentage points of ownership. That's what old Peter would say. I don't think it was a bad play. If you wanted to start with Derrick Henry in your lineup, you just immediately have to say, how can I build around this? If you wanted to jam in Derrick Henry, Mike Davis, Alexander Mattison, and then start playing chalk around it, I probably would have said that's a bad process play. But if you wanted to play Derrick Henry and then say, hey, this Deshaun Watson double stack, no one's on this too much. People aren't talking about Fuller. I can toss in Fells and Brandon Cooks. Well, now all of a sudden we have ourselves on an interesting roster construction where you can eat that chalk. Blender won $50,000 with a nice little mini correlation with Brandon Cooks and Derrick Henry. My buddy Pat Kareem won $10,000 in an $8 tournament with Derrick Henry as the bringback in the aforementioned Watson double stack. Peter Jennings won $200,000 in the luxury box with a mega Vikings onslaught, and he just played Derrick Henry as a one-off running back. Me? No, I didn't play Derrick Henry. I didn't play Derrick Henry. I actually did in one of the $50 single entries. I had a Deshaun Watson double stack, and I brought it back with AJ Brown. Good morning, guys. Good morning. This is going to be a tilt recap show. Yesterday was atrocious for me. I ate absolute shit. And the way I sweat DFS is I don't look at my game score live scoring, which is why I love FanDuel. No, but I don't do it. So I know my lineups, obviously, but I am looking at them with a fresh eyes this morning because I stopped sweating them so early. I had Cam Newton in my main spy lineup and I just stopped. I thought at the end of the game, I was like, Cam Newton has 8 points. I watched that whole game. I was like, Cam Newton has 8 points and he had 20 points. I was like, wow, that's a pleasant surprise. Thank you, chat. The DeAndre Swift call. Yes. We have a thumbnail discrepancy across the Rotogrinders in my channel here. On my channel, I'm broadcasting from a trash can, and on Rotogrinders thumbnail, we're celebrating the Swift call. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Hang on. Actually, let me just do a bow for the Swift call. Thank you. Yeah. Can't believe he didn't win despite playing Swift everywhere. Okay. Wow. Siler, that's unfortunate. Siler is he is the man that launched our Discord for, we're calling it the Deposit Kingdom, which that name's looking a lot better after this week. And if you are on my YouTube channel, it's in the show notes. If you want to join the Discord, lots of good conversation going on in there, talking NFL DFS strategy. We even got some season-long channels. We got a tilt channel. You can even post your screenshots there. We'll allow it. So thank you to Siler for setting that up. And sorry to hear that you got to go to a funeral, brother. Okay. All right, let's take a look at this team. So as I was on record, I publicly, for this challenge, which I've been told to rename the Single Entry Challenge, but I'm still stubbornly calling it the Bankroll Challenge, partly because I don't want to have anyone have to update these graphics. That, frankly, seems like a lot of work. I want to show you guys first the secondary spy, right? So they have the big spy with 5,555 people, and then they have the little spy, the baby spy, with 2,222 people. What if I told you that I finished in 2,220th place? Is that good? Is that good? You're either first or last, right, guys? You're either first or last. Let's look at this team here. So one of my big things that I kind of arrived on later in the week was I was like, why is no one playing this Tampa Bay Green Bay game in DFS? It had the highest over under total on the week. I think it was at a 55 or closed at a 55. The ownership was going to be in check on everyone. I don't think Chris Godwin here ended up at 16.8%. I thought he would get some steam towards the end of the week just because he was off the injury report, 6,400, good matchup. Evans a little banged up. But other than that, everything in check. Aaron Jones, great tournament play. Adams coming back. We know he has that Michael Thomas floor ceiling combination. And I said, I want to get heavy on this game. And it didn't work out. Ronald Jones was obvious the play. I punted it off with Brate at tight end, and Gronk, just had a vintage resurgence. And by that, I mean like 75 yards and a touchdown. This game was close to being a pop-off game, but, the turnovers, the defensive touchdowns, you didn't get the plays that spark an offensive explosion like we got in that Tennessee-Houston game. And that's kind of the thing, too, we forget about. Like, I was talking through that yesterday about how badly we need those splash plays to really accelerate the pace of the game. And it's why it's also attractive to play guys like Marquise Brown, Will Fuller, Henry Ruggs, and dare I say Derrick Henry. Because when they bust off a big play that takes off 10 seconds off the clock, well, all of a sudden this game is off to the races. And that happened in both of the two popular games yesterday, Houston, Tennessee, and Minnesota, Atlanta. And if you didn't have pieces from those games, you were going to finish in the 0.01 percentile of a tournament. Anyways, I'm rambling. Let's at least talk about this more from a construction standpoint here. Did we get all snowflakes? Almost. Tom Brady didn't get us a snowflakes. Look at this DFS snowflake, man. Just so soft. All snowflakes. This is what happens when you play guys attached to dusty QBs. What happened if you played Trey Burton with Phillip Rivers yesterday? That worked out pretty well. We can't make blanket statements like this. All right. So I knew I wanted to game stack this. I don't have regrets about this construction. Brady to Godwin and bring it back with Jones. There are lots of ways that goes right. I did a little mini correlation here with Kareem Hunt and Gigi Smith-Schuster. I thought both of those guys were really good tournament plays at this ownership, and it didn't hit. Kareem Hunt had a rough game. They got trucked by the Steelers. And then Juju, man, lesson learned. When you play contrarian, you're playing a game of chicken with some of these situations and trends that are developing. We're staring down the barrel of Zach Ertz and Juju Smith-Schuster, and it's saying, who's going to blink first? Their talent and their role in the offense, or us contrarian DFS players? Who's going to blink first? Well, I blinked first. I'm not playing Juju again. Man, he is like, even with Deontay Johnson out, to be third fiddle in that wide receiver crew. And hell, even fourth if you include Ebron. It's a tough scene. Again, I actually can't say that I won't play Juju again. His price could drop. Maybe his price plummets to sub fives, to AJ Green levels, and then we can BTD by the dip. But this was a mini correlation I like to do. And then I guess, where this lineup kind of falls apart is that it didn't have as much additional correlation beyond that. Devonta Freeman is a one-off. I thought he was a good play. He touched the ball, I want to say 18 times again yesterday, 61 rush yards. He does seem like the lead back in this offense. I don't have problems taking shots on these running backs that are cheaper that can still see a workhorse volume role. And that's why I ultimately didn't get on Swift. When Adrian Peterson came back, I think Swift was an incredible milli maker play. I think in these smaller fields, it was really tough to play him because in his range of outcomes is 7 or 8 touches. And he ran really good on touchdown expectation. And he had that big play where he ripped off that huge rush. But anyways, in general, I don't mind doing this. I did Antonio Gibson last week. You can get burned, but when I'm trying to jam in some of these high-priced wide receivers like Godwin and Schuster and get up to Aaron Jones, you got to save somewhere. But I don't love that I have like Freeman and Shenault uncorrelated here. Shenault was just a piece that ultimately fit in this lineup. So I do think some mistakes were made here. I did get enamored with Shenault, which I think that's all right, right? I mean, he was 5,200. Chark was banged up all week. It sounded like he was on the wrong side of questionable with the ankle. Shenault had 8 targets last week. This is a game that you thought would shoot out, and he wasn't going to be popular. I was kind of surprised at 5,200, his ownership wasn't going to clear 10%. So like, I'm taking stabs at plays, but when we look at the lineups that have won, the lineups where I've been successful, they've been more heavily correlated. The reason it was harder to correlate or go all in, I think, on this Green Bay Tampa game was just because of the prices. The plays were expensive. Rojo was a good play. I had him. I ended up making 5 lineups, and I did have a Rodgers double stack with Adams and Tanyan where I ran it back with both Rojo and Godwin. The game didn't get there. Sometimes we're going to miss on the game stack. The chalk games got there, and we got burned. And I'm okay with that. I can live with that. Let me check in on the chat here. Yeah, Hodge. I know people were trying to wrestle for the worst lineup. This one's tough to beat here, man. 59.94 points. Should we start a low ball league? Problem with Juju is Fuller, Jones, and Evans in that range at similar ownership were better plays. Yeah, I think you could say that in a vacuum for wide receivers, but when we talk about correlations, I was talking about this with my buddy Brian Hooper on Lulz this week, that the second you start to correlate, the projection for those players increases. Once I have Hunt in this lineup, I am mentally adjusting my projection for Juju, because I am saying if Kareem Hunt hits his ceiling, this game most likely has a lot of points. Ergo, Juju Smith-Schuster's projection increases. So that's why in the correlation stuff, you can nitpick all this stuff and say, oh, Chase Claypool was a better value. Well, actually, that was true, but at his ownership, and I wasn't going to play him with Juju unstacked with Ben. But my point is here is once I played Hunt, Juju got a boost. And then he elevated himself from those other plays that you talked about. Although I did love Fuller. Fuller was one of my best plays. Sometimes you just can't get all these guys in. If I played Derrick Henry in this lineup, then Fuller would have been the like screaming light play correlation that I would have wanted to play on the other side. Yes, Joe, it's a lot of snowflakes. I'm aware of snowflakes. It's freezing. I'm wearing a pullover hoodie because I'm so cold. I was on a heater and now I'm freezing. As they say in Game of Thrones, winter is coming. Winter is coming. Your bankroll is going to get frozen over. I'm way too wired for a Monday morning here. Okay. The Snowflake King. No, that's not my nickname. Please don't make that my nickname. Let's look at the other big spy here. So this lineup, not much better. 5,555 entries. We finished 4,552. If you guys saw the lineup that we ran in the luxury box yesterday for the tilt space with Holka and Leone, it's was a similar construction to this. Basically, we did a Cam skinny stack here with Damiere Byrd. Damiere Byrd was only 3,500. With the thesis being there were a lot of those other mini correlations that I liked. You know, the Juju Kareem Hunt, the who are the other ones I liked? Well, I didn't get in the Justin Jefferson Julio, but those were the kind of correlations that you can get in when you do a skinny stack. Because when you do these game stacks, you're using up 4 or 5 positions on one game, and then it's hard to make those pieces fit that you want. So in this one, just did a Cam skinny stack with Damiere Byrd, didn't bring it back. Did consider Lindsey. I did consider him. Ultimately, I felt good about that. Lindsey did hit the bonus, but if you look at the snap shares with him and Royce Freeman, if you would have seen those snap shares before the game, you wouldn't have wanted to play Lindsey. And that was the concern, is that Royce Freeman was going to be more involved than we want. And I actually think Lindsey is by far the most talented guy in that backfield. And under different circumstances, I think he would have been a smash play. But coming off of that injury, I think there was just a little more uncertainty with his projected workload, and when you combine that they were projected to be in a negative game script. So just from a pure process standpoint, I'm okay not bringing it back with Lindsey there. I did get the correlation here with Shenault and Hawkinson. I really liked Hawkinson there. He's fine. He did have 3 red zone targets there and did finally get in the end zone. You didn't get from this game what you wanted. DeAndre Swift stole all the TDs here. In Shenault, he just didn't get there, man. Minshew looked bad when he finally got things going. He went to Cole. He rushed one in. It is what it is. I did get Fuller in as a one-off play here. And I played Jonathan Taylor, similar to the kind of Kareem Hunt, a running back that I think was going to have a really nice role. They kind of scaled back Wilkins. There's chatter about them wanting to get him more touches. And it was actually borne out when you look at his receiving work. 4 receptions for 60 yards. The game script got away from him early. The Bengals got up and you're like, oh shit, here we go. Part of the thesis here was the Colts are 7.5 point home faves. Jonathan Taylor should be able to rumble to a good game. But this is why you have outs when you play backs that catch passes, because Jonathan Taylor got game scripted out and he still finishes with 15.5 points because he gets you 10 points through the receiving game. That's why it's massive. We had the Aaron Jones Godwin correlation. That was my other favorite mini correlation. I loved it. I mean, we know Aaron Jones has the just immense ceiling. And I thought Chris Godwin was way undervalued relative to his ceiling, relative to his ownership, relative to this game environment, relative to his price. I was playing Chris Godwin everywhere I could. It didn't get there. We talked about this a little bit on the Tilt Space last night. I have a leak in my game, I think, with defenses. I mean, I am just so quick to punt it off. And I'll admit, I have the Rotogrinders Chrome extension up where I see the ownership percentages on the plays when I'm in the DraftKings app. And I wasn't even paying attention to the ownership on defenses. I was just saying, I want these guys. Oh, I have 2,300 left. Vikings. Oh, I have 2,100 left. Bengals. Wasn't even looking at the ownership. And I think it's okay to punt off at defense if you're cognizant of ownership. And I wasn't, because I was just like, screw it. I'm going to play who I want, and then I'm just going to punt it off at D. And I think you can punt it off at D if you are cognizant of ownership. And I didn't do that this week. I don't like playing a chalky defense, and then you see what happens at 0. And I actually did. I was staring at my lineups and I was like, man, I have a lot of Vikings. I was like, what if I diversify a little bit with the Bengals? I mean, are they really that different of plays? This one, I didn't do it because I had Jonathan Taylor, but I did have some others where I could have just diversified my punt defenses and gotten a little bit more Bengals in there at lower ownership. It's so volatile. I mean, there's only one thing you can do, and just fade the higher owned defenses. I need to start, when I build, I need to engineer differently to where it's not just the very last thing I'm doing. Let me check in on the chat. Sometimes, like Derrick Henry on these rants, the train just leaves the station and I forget what's going on here. If you keep this up, you'll be in line for a Crown and or apple cider sponsorship. Yeah, I did polish off a bottle of Crown yesterday. I'm scaling back my drinking. I said it to Lauren this morning. I was like, I've been drinking too much. We're going to reserve it to a couple days a week. It's time to get back on track. Lindsey, to do well, would eat a ton of clock, and then Cam would likely not hit a ceiling. Yeah, it's hard for those. If you do that bring back with the running back, you need it exactly like what happened with Derrick Henry in that Titans game, where Derrick Henry gets the lead on the ground and then Watson, hair on fire mode, is playing catch up. That's the game script. And it's hard to project that. Looks like Hodge and I were in the same boat with the Cam train yesterday. It is still wild to me that he got 20.48 points on that game. I mean, just absolutely atrocious. I really want N'Keal Harry to be a thing. I really want to, but I mean, his weapons are so bad. They're so bad. Construction theory question. When I build, I start with my stacks and leave the RB flex open and fill in. I usually just fill in random RBs in each lineup based on how chalky my stack is. Yeah, I don't think there's a right way or wrong way. The way I've been thinking about it lately is the second you put something into your lineup, even one thing, that now has a domino effect on how you view the entire player pool and every subsequent decision. You put a piece in, okay, now it's a dynamic thing that is squeezing your salary in one direction or another. Oh, you have a guy with a lot of ownership? Well, now I'm having to look at some plays that don't have as much ownership to balance it out and make sure I'm not too chalky. Oh, I put in this quarterback? Well, now I'm literally boosting the projections on his wide receivers as it pertains to this lineup construction. So I think that's the thing I'm thinking about is when Blender says you can play anyone you want, it's true. If you want to put Derrick Henry as your first guy, your flag plant play, go for it. But now the player pool just changed. The dynamics of everything just changed for you the second you made that decision. It all has a domino effect on all the subsequent decisions. So, and that's what I was kind of talking about with defense is like, I have not been thinking mindfully about defense. I've just literally just been punting it off, not even looking at ownership, whatever, it doesn't matter. And I think I should build some lineups where I put a defense in first. I put a tight end that I like in. And then I build from there. The same principles, the same concepts I'm going to apply. The dynamic changing of what that means for the rest of the lineup, but you can start wherever you want. That's why this is so fun. If you have your flag plant play, like for me this week, it was like Aaron Jones and Godwin. I started there in a lot of spots. And that's how you actually end up on a Cam skinny, because you like all these individual pieces, these mini correlations, and you go, I can't do a game stack, a double stack with a bring back. I don't have room for all of it. So you get led to a Cam skinny stack, which was super attractive with the Damiere Byrd because it was cheap, which allowed you to get in the more expensive mini game correlations, and it was skinny. It gave you roster spot flexibility. This is opposed to a Lamar Jackson, which is really hard to do because Andrews and Marquise Brown are so expensive on DraftKings especially. It's really hard to do the skinny and then also get in the higher price correlations you like. If you did that one, you would have to do more mid-price correlations. Like I was looking at Shenault and Marvin Jones, Shenault and TJ Hawkinson. So again, that's another one of those constraints. Oh, I want to do a Lamar skinny to Mark Andrews. Great. But now the constraints are felt price-wise and the other kind of correlations we can do. DP says, I had my best week so far. Thanks to you and Joe. Awesome to hear, man. Awesome to hear. No interest in correlating DST with RB. I've done that a bit. And I think sometimes if it's kind of threading the needle, you know, like if the defensive price and ownership match up with the running back price and ownership, like I think a great example yesterday was the Dolphins. Gaskin ended up getting some steam on ownership, but it didn't get out of hand. And same with the Dolphins D at 2,800. Both were affordable. Both were probably under-owned relative to their projection in the spot against the Jets as big home favorites. So I don't think, again, you can start with those if you want. And I need to cite my sources, but I want to say that I've heard that it isn't as correlated as you would think, at least in the recent stuff. And I need to look into that. If someone watching knows where that's been mentioned, I listen to so much stuff now, but I'm sure I want to say one of the sharps out there mentioned that the DST RB isn't as strong of a correlation that you need to build around it. But I think if it fits in those instances, I think it works. I mean, Rojo, Bucks D would have been a great one yesterday as well, although Bucks D was a little more expensive. Yeah, it has been a bad year for DST punts. We had that one, was it week 1 or 2, where Washington went off against the Eagles, I want to say, as the punt D, but that's the only one I can remember here. Yeah, man, the chalkitis, it's flaring up. My chalkitis was flaring up, but I'm at peace with it. I'm gonna eat shit these weeks, but that's okay. I still maintain that it was a great week to not play the chalk, because there were so many plays in so many games that had all of the characteristics you want from GPP winning plays in games at lower ownership. So of course I'm always going to take that side. No regrets. No regrets. Here we go. Trying to keep up on the chat here. The contrarian game stack with other correlated mini game stacks worked out okay for Blender's win, for sure. Yeah. And that's actually, so that lineup, he had a Matt Ryan skinny to Julio. He brought it back with Justin Jefferson. He had the mini correlation with Derrick Henry and Brandon Cooks. He ate the Mike Davis chalk. He ate the Trey Burton chalk at tight end, and he played the Steelers D. I hate that I have an encyclopedic recall of Blender's lineup. That's how messed up my brain is right now. What I love about that play is the skinny. And I think that makes sense for that contest. I believe that was in the slant, right? Which is a much bigger contest where you need to get more individual things right. If he plays Ridley there with Julio, he's squeezing himself out of other plays and capping his ceiling relative, even though he's eliminating the number of things he has to get right. It was a great lineup. It was a very great lineup. And I guess what I was going to say is my leak there is I started to shy away from that game because I didn't really know how to attack it. And, you know, my buddy Pat, he didn't even use a quarterback there. He just did the one-off correlation of Julio and Jefferson. And that's more realistically what I would have ended up on, just because I would have felt it would have been hard with Thielen and Cousins and Irv being popular. It was hard with Ridley and Hurst being popular. So you kind of had to just cherry pick the right pieces. But Jefferson and Julio were those right pieces, 100%. They had the ceiling. They had the low price. They had the low ownership. I mean, in hindsight, it's just so glaringly obvious. Justin Jefferson and Julio were the plays. I got worried about Julio. I was reading Gene Bramall's injury reports on Football Guys, and I'm not blaming Gene Bramall for not playing Julio, but I was pretty spooked. And I know he was off the injury report, but the way Bramall described it of why this was a situation that was more different than previous years and why he thought there was concern for a limited role or re-aggravation. And so I didn't mess with it. But purely looking at the numbers, the ceiling, the ownership, the game environment, smash play. Absolute smash play. And congrats to everyone who didn't get scared by that injury report like I did. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, I believe it. That was Leone and Dink talking about the running back DST correlation. Someone says Adam Levitan. Someone said it, and they were right. So let's see. Better to eat shit than eat chalk. Tattoo that on my chest after a losing week. Better to eat shit than eat chalk, you chalk donkey idiots. To win GPPs, you're looking for defensive touchdowns. When that happens, your RB generally loses TD ops. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And again, too, like we want the Gaskins Miami D example is more of the one where the defense is just a solid play. The game doesn't pace up. And they're getting their points primarily through sacks and low scoring. But to really hit the ceiling, we want those shootout games, pick sixes, strip sack returns for touchdowns, stuff that speed it up. And then naturally, as you mentioned, remove opportunities from the running back. So I think intuitively it makes sense why that isn't a smash correlation. Drew says, do you think Madison was likely a bad play since it was a reaction off such a sample size of one game when Boone played a ton last year? And this is the thing. Like, there were 4 chalk running backs, 5 if you include Gaskin, who came at the end. But if you faded Madison or Mike Davis, you were in great shape. Even if you faded Montgomery, you could live with that. But if you faded Derrick Henry, you got buried yesterday. So this is why you can't like pick and choose. Like, I'm not good enough to pick and choose. Are people good enough to know like Alexander Madison is a bad play at this ownership and price, and Derrick Henry at similar price and ownership is a good play? I'm not good enough to do that, but I am at least able to think through, hey, I like other pieces in my lineup that I think can access similar ceilings, and it's a path of less resistance. The reason it's nice going contrarian is because it gives you multiple ways to win. Like your picks, my Kareem Hunt or Aaron Jones, could just match Derrick Henry at lower ownership, and that's going to help me out. Or if that construction doesn't work, my pieces just do okay, and we beat those guys. And I think it was Blender and Davis. I was listening to them on the Takecast talk about how contrarian players generally are trying to win the low-scoring weeks. It's when all the chalk goes bad that the pivots do just enough to elevate you over the chalk. Well, this week the chalk smashed and the pivots didn't. So this is going to be a huge disparity, polarizing week. The contrarian player's taking a big fat L this week. But it's still a path of less resistance. When you're playing those chalk constructions, you're playing 1v1s and 2v2s in these tournaments. You're saying, oh, it's my Brandon Cooks, or that's not a good example because those guys weren't chalky. But when you're playing those 3 or 4 chalk running backs, you're saying, okay, it's my Mike Davis, Montgomery, Henry versus your Henry, Mike Davis, and Gaskin. It's possible. It's definitely possible to win playing the best plays. It's just harder to win tournaments and jump people in contests when you guys are on similar constructions. And that's why I like getting off of those constructions. It's why I like trying to get access to some of these high ceiling wide receivers that might be more pricey. And can they bust like Juju and Godwin did yesterday? Of course. But we're still chasing that ceiling in a different construction that makes our lineup unique. Let's see here. Let's check in on the chat. I like your point about DST. We had one of the most lopsided matchups for O-line, D-line, and we just didn't pay attention. That's the thing. You know, I like checking out Brandon Thorne's article, and unfortunately, a lot of those guys are generally priced accordingly. You know, the Ravens, the Steelers, the Bucs, like those defenses that are good and that have really good D-line mismatches, they're priced up. And I mentioned that's a leak in my game that I haven't been putting those guys in. I haven't been using them as a starting point. To copy Davis, what was the thesis of Pat's play of Julio in the flex over RB? I keep jamming 3 RBs, but would like to hear your thoughts on how you think that decision worked. Yeah, let me pull that lineup up here. I actually have that for Pat. 1 second here. So I love playing 4 wide receivers in the flex. If you listen to the Advanced Analytics show, Brandon Adams is a big proponent of this. You know, last year, I know Levitan did the Millie Maker Trends article, and running backs were in the flex last year a large amount of the time. But this year, the trends are turning a little bit. We're seeing wide receiver in the flex way more. And I love this lineup. I mentioned it earlier. So Pat did that Watson double stack. I mean, you're getting Fuller, Cooks, and Watson all at relatively sub 10% ownership. You bring it back with Derrick Henry. He was willing to eat chalk at running back, but it's really the Fuller play, the Jefferson play, and the Julio play. None of those guys were going unowned. They weren't galaxy brain out of left field plays. They were all plays, though, that had access to a monstrous ceiling. So I guess to answer your question here, the way I think through it is generally from a roster construction standpoint. And I generally have a hard time finding 3 running backs that a couple of them are going to be lower owned and affordable enough for me to access the ceiling I like. So generally what happens is I'm normally eating like 1 chalk running back. I'm taking a stab on another running back that's a contrarian guy like a Jonathan Taylor, a Devonta Freeman, as you saw in those lineups, and Aaron Jones. And then I'm trying to jam in access to these other wide receivers that give me that ceiling, because generally just the way the prices work, at 6,000, 6,700, it's hard to get that ceiling at running back at those prices, but you can get it from the wide receivers. And it's just a perfectly correlated lineup. The double stack with the Henry bring back, he got the perfect game script. And then just this one-off mini correlation of Jefferson and Jones, the two best pieces in that game from a ceiling, price, and ownership perspective. Beautiful. And then just willing to eat chalk at the other spots. Gaskin, Burton, and hell, defense doesn't matter when you're putting up 246. Great lineup by Pat Kareem. We do the Ship Chasing podcast every single Wednesday night. I got a link to that show. We talk about our main event, high stakes teams. If you guys want to hear us talk about season long, Pat also does a weekly show called Stat Chasing. It's on our Ship Chasing YouTube feed. He does a rundown of all of the stats across the league. And it is such a great primer for your weekly research. It's completely free. He has really cool charts up from Sam Hoppin. He's looking at air yards data. He's looking at market share, targets per route run for running backs. He's looking at snap data. It is, I can't recommend it enough. Obviously, I'm biased. It's on the Ship Chasing channel, but it's such a good primer for laying the foundation for your research for the week. So that's my rant about jamming wide receivers. Balancing the weight of player ability and matchup is tough, i.e. is Henry good or Houston D bad? Yeah. And that's why I try not to get into that business. I know that's ultimately what's really fun to talk about. This guy's good. This guy's dust. This guy's wash. This defense sucks. This defense is a funnel. I don't think I'm that good at predicting that, but I can look at numbers. I can look at ceiling projection. I can look at ownership. I can think about correlations. That I can do. So I'm just going to stick to what I know and not play that game. But there are people who can play that game, who know football better than me, who are watching the tape. I've given Davis a hard time. Davis is out here grinding the all 22. I'm not watching any all 22. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? That's not how I'm spending my time. All right, here. Yes, Swift could have worked with that thinking. He could have. I got scared off of my own play. This week, there were way more wide receivers with much higher ceilings than chalk RBs. Mike Davis in a bad matchup versus Julio was an easy choice. Yeah, and again, hindsight bias is a powerful thing. I think Mike Davis's role, I thought Mike Davis was the best of the chalk RBs, especially once Curtis Samuel was ruled out. Levitan's out here getting wrecked on Reddit for saying he's 99% CMC. I also love Levitan's time. He's completely right, but the timing of that to come out and blow up right before this game is rough. But yeah, with Mike Davis's role, I have no problem with that. I thought Mike Davis and Gaskin, I thought were really, really good chalk yesterday. That was chalk I was willing to eat. But I totally agree with your point that if we're looking at game environment and we're even just looking at implied totals, we're checking out Thorman's pace article. We're trying to see what games pace up. Yeah, Mike Davis wasn't in a smash spot. He wasn't in a great spot. His workload gave him a really high floor, but he didn't have the game environment that we'd like to see. We didn't have a game environment where, Justin Jefferson can rip off these big TDs and the game just gets shot into overdrive. And that's hard. That's why this is such a puzzle, because it's IDing those games, but being able to get creative within them. That's why it was so hard to have Tannehill stacks yesterday. Obviously, everyone thought the Titans were in a great spot, but it's like Henry, AJ Brown, and Jonnu are all going to be popular. How do I get leverage? Or am I just saying I'm going to play a 4v4 with the rest of the field? I don't want to play a 4v4. That's not the path of least resistance. I want to take a different road. And sure, playing the 4v4 yesterday would have been better off than what I did, but it probably puts me in min cash territory once I'm playing 4v4s. The amount of things I have to get right relative to my competition just increases. Not only do we all collectively have to be right with our chalk plays, but then I need to be more right than you with my individual plays after the chalk stack. Yeah, the Madison thing was tough. Again, like I was talking about it on Sunday morning, and it was just like I wasn't saying he was a bad play. It was just not my preferred of those chalk plays. They're chalk for a reason. Like we're not getting chalk just out of left field. Madison was in a great spot. But the whole point is how many times, if you play that game out 100 times, how many times does Alexander Madison pay off 7,200 price tag? Then you compare it to the ownership and you say, is it worth it? If he's smashing that 50, 60% time, 50 or 60% of the time, then yeah, he's a good play. But if you're telling me, looking at those odds, like I'm going to say Mike Davis is going to have more success in that spot most of the time at a similar price tag. That's just kind of the way I think about it. And I'm generally not going to play these 3 high-priced running backs. And I'm much more likely to eat chalk if it's at an affordable price tag. Madison at 7,200 versus Gaskin at 5,400. It wasn't even close for me. I needed those savings to be able to jam in guys like Juju and Godwin. But I mean, like Gaskin's role has everything we want. He's a true bell cow. I mean, Jordan Howard ruled inactive again. And yeah, it wasn't the greatest game environment, but he didn't run that great in touchdown expectation. If he gets in the box, he smashes. 16.6, he gets in the box once, then you're looking at 23.6 points at 5,400. I'm starting to understand the lineup building part. Like you said, easier to get 3 things right than 8. Now just need to build up the bankroll. Yeah, I mean, again, Pat got a ton right in this lineup, so this isn't the best example. But let me see. I don't know. Let me see if I can pull up Peter Jennings' lineup from the luxury box yesterday. I'm going to try to pull this up. Give me a second here while I scroll through, because I think this is actually a good point. Here we go. Luxury box about the amount of things you have to get right. All right, CSU Ram at the top here. Look at this. Now, he did a similar construction to what Leone did last week, where he did the triple stack. And the triple stack wasn't on my radar. Wasn't on my radar again, but look at the amount of things Pete got right. He had Kirk Cousins onslaught, Thielen, Justin Jefferson, Irv Smith, and then he brings it back with the affordable bring back, Julio Jones. Then he hits Derrick Henry. He got 2 things right. And this is not a knock. This is saying how important it is. And again, we got to consider the field size here. There's only 369 entries in here. The triple stack is firmly in play in a field size like this. I don't think you'd run out the triple stack in the Millie Maker. I think that's probably negative EV over the long run. You have to get too many individual things right. However, he got 1 game stack and 1 chalk running back right, and he won $200,000. Montgomery was fine. Gaskin was fine. Dolphins was fine. But he eliminated the decision-making with this lineup. And yeah, Irv Smith was chalky. He wasn't a guy I was playing. Neither of the tight ends that my buddies Pat and Pete won lots of money with was I considering at their ownership. But I love how he's used here. It's just like, why not? If you're making a big bet on this game, why not throw in the punt wide receiver? Similar to what Leone did last week with Fells. I had a Watson, Fells, Fuller stack, and I had gotten off of Cooks because I was like, I don't want to do a triple stack, when the answer was all of them. You're paying, if you think about it this way, you're paying a cumulative price tag for all of the passing touchdowns in that offense. And when you're only adding an extra $2,500 onto that price tag, that's a pretty good proposition. Do I do stand-up? No, I've never done stand-up. I did improv for a long time. I did do stand-up a couple times. If you go back on my YouTube channel, the Mans did stand-up once. If you search Mans stand-up, you can see Pete Manzanelli doing stand-up. I had pretty much this exact same lineup with Mike Davis instead of Henry. Joe Holka had literally this exact same lineup with the pivot of Mike Davis instead of Henry. That's how close the margins are. I think Joe said he min cashed. Min cash, I forget which contest he was in, but that is how thin the margins are. You want to be making good lineups and then getting lucky in that upper percentile. You are not a bad DFS player because you played Mike Davis over Derrick Henry in this lineup. You're not. You just didn't get lucky. What's the phrase we've been saying, right? Shots on goal. We just want to get these shots on goal. You want to get yourself in that top 20, top 30, and just have a chance that everything breaks right. That lightning bolt hits. And you just keep putting shots on goal. And we're cognizant of the size tournaments we're playing, the type of fields we're playing, and we're making decisions accordingly. I think this is a great example of these two tournaments here, 369, the triple stack onslaught firmly in play. Pat, in this bigger tournament, I don't have it pulled up here for the Engage 8. I'm sure it's like 10,000 people, $3 or $8 3 max. Pat knew he had to get more things right. So he didn't go as all in. He knew, okay, could he have tossed in Irv Smith here? Totally. But he lowers his ceiling because every time Justin Jefferson gets a touchdown, Irv Smith isn't. So then by putting in Trey Burton, he's getting access to touchdowns that aren't negatively correlated with the rest of his pieces. So again, moral of the story, you got to be looking at your contest size and knowing what kind of things do you need to do to make it realistic for you to win. All right. I am a Twitter troll. I am. I guess those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. I've learned a lot at DFS, and I know, like, just when I do a lot of shows, so I talk confidently just because that's what you need to do to be an engaging speaker. But do not mistake my confidence behind a mic as thinking I have it all figured out. I do not. I have learned so much in the past 6 or 7 months, like light years ahead of where I was at before. I was a shitty DFS player, like up until about 6 months ago. But like I worked on it. I talked with my guy, Brian Hooper, Brick75, all through the offseason, playing other DFS sports, fucking League of Legends. Sorry, Devin. I mean to not cuss on these. MMA, PGA, all of that. I mean, it helped because I started to wrap my head around the game theory. I got away from thinking about who's in the best matchup, who's the good player, who's dust, who's all of this, because those things don't ultimately matter. We are playing a strategic game. And so, yeah. So I guess my moral of the story is I appreciate the kind words. I do think I've gotten much better. I have a much better understanding of things, but man, I'm still figuring things out. Like I just admitted at the show, I just completely punting off defense. Didn't even think about it. Huge leak in my game that I'm going to work on. I've mentioned with these triple stacks, hadn't even considered it. Now, 2 weeks in a row where there were good, viable triple stacks, relative field size, didn't even cross my mind. Lots of stuff I have to work on. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep working every week, get smarter, get sharper, talk to smart people every Friday on my channel and the Rotogrinders channel at noon. We will get a guest. We had Andrew Wiggins last week. And honestly, I think those things are evergreen. If you want to go back and watch those, like there's tons of people I like in the industry. I do shows with lots of people, but I'm very specific with who I bring on for these shows because I want people who are thinking about DFS from a game theory perspective. There are a million shows I see in our chats. They're like, well, what do you think about this play? What do you think about this play? That like, I don't mind touching on those as it relates to ownership and ceiling and all that and correlations, but I don't want it to be a pick show. I don't want it to be a who to play show because I want to get into the weeds about how do we think about DFS each week in and week out where we can apply the same concepts to the new puzzle pieces over and over. So every Friday, if you guys want to go back and watch those with Bime4, with Wiggins, with Blender, with Chop, all of those shows, I think I'm trying to ask the questions that are most interesting to me, the things I'm trying to figure out, the things I'm trying to learn. So we're going to keep learning. We're going to keep getting better, and we're going to have trash weeks like this. That's just what it is. But I appreciate you guys coming out. As I mentioned, I have the Discord link if you guys want to come in. Lots of good conversation going on with that. If you guys haven't subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. Give me some likes. That's what the YouTubers tell me you're supposed to do at the end of these videos. Love you guys. We will be back. We will keep rolling. Have a great Monday.